This week on Who Deserves to Be Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we look at the case for putting the group Black Flag into the Hall. This week, we are going to take a look at the case for putting the Hermosa Beach, California band Black Flag into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Black Flag, who have been eligible for the Hall since 2004, started out as the band Panic from 1976 to 1978 before doing a name change. Their most famous era was when Henry Rollins was their frontman from 1981 to 1986. Band founder Greg Ginn is the only continuous member since the beginning of the group, from 1978 through the Rollins era when they broke up in 1986, their first reunion in 2003, their second reunion from 2013 to 2014, and their current run from 2019 to today. They've had 32 members over the decades. However, arguably, their most famous members are Greg Ginn and Henry Rollins. Black Flag is one of those groups that has attained cult status, even though no one can name a single song or album of theirs. It's a lot like people who swear that they love reggae, but when you press them to name anything other than a song on Bob Marley and the Wailers' greatest hits album, Legend, they will just give you a blank look and then try to change the subject. Since we're about to get into Black Flag stats, pay attention so you can at least fake it the next time someone asks you if you're a hardcore punk fan. This stats session will be quick because honestly, absolutely nothing charted anywhere from them. With that said, to the tail of the tape we go. Black Flag released 7 studio albums, 3 live albums, 4 compilation albums, 8 EPs, and 2 singles. Their studio albums were 1981's Damaged, 1984's My War, Family Man, and Slip It In, 1985's Loose Nut and In My Head, and 2013's What The. Their 2 singles were 1981's Louie Louie with Damaged 1 as the B-side, and 1986's Annihilate This Week. The album Damaged also made Rolling Stone magazine's 500 Greatest Albums of All Times list. That should help you out the next time you want to seem cool or a hipster or whatever the kids are saying these days. Okay, so as far as their success goes, that's a grade F, at least on the mainstream scale. Why then are they so revered, especially Henry Rollins? And why do they get a grade A? Oh, that's easy. That's because of their influence. Black Flag was one of the first hardcore punk bands and one of the pioneers of the post-hardcore punk movement. They were also one of the groups who came up through the DIY method, or do-it-yourself, if you will. They did their own artwork, came up with their branding through a friend of theirs. They booked their own gigs and would literally play anywhere. House basements, small clubs, parties, parking lots, anywhere did not matter. Their live shows were intense, energetic, and chaotic in all the best ways possible. They helped to influence grunge music, as Kurt Cobain has said in numerous interviews that he was heavily influenced by them. Mudhoney and Soundgarden were influenced by Black Flag as well. Other groups that they influenced included Bad Brains, Minor Threat, and Negative Approach. So why haven't they been inducted yet? Well, according to some, a lot of it has to do with the fact that they weren't mainstream enough. All right, but that was by design. Being anti-establishment was their bread and butter. Campaigning to get in would look like they were selling out, which goes against every single thing that they and punk rock stood for. Still, the Clash and the Ramones were anti-establishment, and they're in. They also had a major label contract, so I guess you could make the argument that they did sell out, even though they really didn't. In any event. Also, the Hall seems to have a bias against putting in certain genres, and punk is right up there. However, when everyone's chief gripe against the Hall is that they're not putting in enough rock artists, is it really a good thing to ignore punk artists, progressive rock artists, and grunge rock artists? I think not. Therefore, put Black Flag in. Whether they show up or not is a different matter. In fact, they shouldn't show up. That way they could still keep their street cred, but definitely take their rightful place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And that is it for who deserves to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We also invite you to check out our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast, where we go over what happened on that date in music history. That podcast drops daily, including weekends, on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. We also have the Music History In-Depth podcast, where we go more in-depth into the events that happened for that week in music history. And that podcast posts every Tuesday on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. Thank you very, very much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube or Spotify.